Every time you try to take a step in the right direction, you get these paralyzing thoughts. What if I fail? The chances are too low, I'd rather save my energy. It's not a good idea because I'm just gonna fail. That is called the fear of failure. And it only attacks you when you decide to move towards success. Because to succeed in life, you need to fail. But at this moment, your mind hasn't fully comprehended that, resulting in this fear. And I'm not telling you this to belittle you. I once struggled with this fear as well. So in this video, I hope to completely rewire your mind to let go of this fear by sharing how I personally was able to overcome it. So yeah, enough yapping. Let's start by figuring out the enemy, because knowing a problem is solving half of it. I spent like 5 minutes on this drawing and it got 2 seconds of screen time. So anyways, I really missed making these whiteboard videos, so it's good to be back, and then it's good to see you again. Sorry guys, I had to move you further back because I felt you were just too close to me and I was feeling uncomfortable. So yes, let's start by asking the question, where and how did this fear even come to be? And look, this is a question I asked myself because every time I tried to take action on that business, on self-improvement or whatever it is, I always had these thoughts of self-doubt, and I was getting quite irritated. So I asked myself, where do these thoughts even come from? Like, why am I so afraid to fail? What could possibly happen? So then I did some reflecting and I found out an answer. But before I share that answer with you guys, I want you to know that humans are just very complex creatures, and it's very, very rare to have a certain answer when it comes to psychology. So just note that the answer was a result of years of critical thinking and self-reflection. So it may not be accurate to you, but you may find some connection to it. But anyway, we first need to know that fear is a belief, and beliefs come from experience. Not just any experience. It has to be an influential experience, a life-changing experience per se. And most life-changing experiences happen when you're a child. And that's because as a kid, our brains are much more absorbent to information. We're easier to influence. That's why your mom or your dad might have said, oh, that's a bad influence, that's a bad influence, oh, that's a good influence, whatever the fuck about influence, right? And that's because as kids, we are more susceptible to information, and we can completely switch our belief systems, our worldviews with a singular experience. But as an adult, it takes much more to change and shift beliefs. You may need a traumatic experience. But what if a child goes through traumatic experiences? Well, this, I'm afraid, is where the fear of failure comes from, or at least where I think it comes from. So now that we know where, which is our childhood, we need to answer the how. And I have like 3 examples that are pretty specific, but in general, it's usually due to a strong negative experience with failure. I mean, as a kid, most of our parents would scold us every time we'd failed to do something. Unless you had really good parents. I'm very envious of you guys. But it's not really our parents' fault, because our education system in general looks down on failure, makes it seem like failure is something that should be avoided at all costs. But is it a coincidence that every self-made millionaire or anyone that has achieved great things in life tells you to fail? I don't think it's a coincidence. I think you actually do need to fail to succeed, because when I was able to succeed, even though it's at a much smaller scale, I had to fail at first. So in general, it's usually due to a strong negative experience with failure. So you're probably starting to understand how we're gonna solve this fear of failure, right? But before that, let's get into the examples here. The first one is criticism. And if you have Asian parents, I know you can relate, because I had Asian parents. See, if we have a constant negative reinsurance in the context of failure in the form of criticism, and then this continuous cycle of negative feedback kind of builds, especially as a kid, when you constantly go through criticism, and that criticism is tied in with failure, then as a teenager and as an adult, this manifests into a fear of failure, because your mind has subconsciously tried to survive by avoiding this criticism. This traumatic criticism that you felt as a kid, your body has accustomed itself to avoid it by fearing failure. Because the mind thinks whenever you experience failure, you also experience the criticism. So biologically, it's actually a survival mechanism. As a kid, we dislike getting shouted at by our parents for getting something wrong. So then biologically, we're coded for survival. So to survive getting shouted at by our parents, we naturally start to fear failure. And that's just one way of how fear of failure could manifest. And look, there's millions of different variations on how fear of failure can come to life, but I'm only going to be sharing 3 specific examples that I've thought about with myself and with a few of my friends as well. Now, the second one is very sad, and I'm very lucky not to have this experience, but I know a few of you that have. The second one is conditional love. What that basically means is your parents or the people you respect or the people you look up to only give you love whenever you don't fail, whenever you succeed. And as a child, we crave love from our parents, obviously, right? So then, whenever we fail and we don't get this love, it creates a belief in the child's mind that if I fail, that means I'm inadequate or I'm not worth being loved. So I want to avoid failure as much as possible, which then creates this fear of failure. And again, this is not a one-time thing. I mean, it could be a one-time thing if it's very traumatic, but it's usually built up of small little experiences that constantly feed the narrative that failure is a very, very negative experience. And again, all of these things creates a belief, which is called a paradigm, which I'll get into later. But right before I go into paradigms, I want to explain the last but not least example, which is public humiliation. You see, not all experiences have to come from your childhood. I mean, even like I said in the beginning, even as an adult, you can start to manifest these beliefs, but it's just much easier to form as a kid because we're more sensitive as a kid. But this example is for teenagers, especially for people going to school. And this is experienced by kids who get bullied or get publicly humiliated every time they fail. Okay? So I hope you're starting to understand that this fear of failure comes from multiple experiences that provide evidence that failure is a very negative thing. And failure leads to these negative experiences like public humiliation, criticism, and conditional love. And this belief is called a paradigm. And just before I get into it, let's just recap. The fear of failure comes from a belief that was formed by negative experiences, usually in your childhood. Now, a belief can also be a paradigm, and a paradigm is a lens in which you see the world. So say, for example, my dad used to abuse me while listening to metal music. He would beat my ass like with heavy metal music playing. So as an adult, every time I hear metal music, I'll just start to reimagine the scenario of getting beaten the fuck up by my dad, right? I'm only kidding, guys, that didn't happen. But that experience creates a paradigm that I hate metal music because it reminds me of that trauma. So every time I see or I hear metal music, I get this feeling of, I guess, discomfort or sadness or anger or whatever it is, because I have a paradigm that I don't like metal music. So imagine this paradigm as a lens. That's a shit lens. All right, that's a better lens. So this lens we'll call the fear of failure paradigm. So this is your fear of failure, and you have this lens currently. So every time you get a new experience, it gets passed through this lens, which then creates a result. And the fear of failure paradigm has certain properties in it. And those properties are to avoid failure at all costs because, again, it relates back to all the negative experiences we've had as a child or as a teenager or as an adult, right? So this paradigm only activates when there's an opportunity for failure. Meaning, let's say you get an opportunity to start a business, but that means there's an opportunity to fail as well. So then that experience gets passed through the fear of failure paradigm, which results in you not taking action because you have the fear of failure paradigm. Are you starting to understand? Take another example. Let's say a new opportunity comes. You have to become the manager of a McDonald's. That, although is a good opportunity, has room for failure, meaning it's going to be passed through the fear of failure paradigm, which then results in you not taking that job because there's a chance for failure. So because of this paradigm, every opportunity gets passed through this lens and you're just like, nope, I don't want to do it. I don't want to fail. I don't want to do it. I don't want to fail, right? So to overcome the fear of failure, it's simple, but quite long and tedious, but it's simple. See, all we have to do is change this paradigm. Now, you're probably asking, bro, it can't be that simple. All I have to do is just change the belief that failure is not a bad thing? Yes, that's what I'm saying. But that's very oversimplified. Let me explain it more. How do we actually change a paradigm? How do we shift the paradigm? Well, how do paradigms form in the first place? Experiences. experiences shape beliefs, and beliefs are paradigms, right? So all we have to do is give ourselves experiences that change our paradigm. See, what experiences cause the fear of failure? Answer me right now. A negative experience towards failure, right? So all we have to do is create positive experiences towards failure. But that's easier said than done. How do we actually do that? Well, now that you know the enemy and now that you know its weakness, we can now start by shifting the paradigm. I want you to have a paradigm that makes it easy for you to succeed. One that allows you to embrace success instead of embrace mediocrity. And to do that, we have my secret weapon, mental feedback loops. Okay, what is a mental feedback loop? Believe it or not, this loop actually caused you to have that paradigm of fear of failure in the first place. You see, it starts with a belief, which then carries on to action. And this action becomes feedback, which further strengthens its belief. And from belief, it goes into action, and then feedback, and then belief, and then action, and feedback. And this creates the paradigm, the lens, right? So fear of failure came from a belief that failure is bad. And although that belief started off weak as a child, every single experience you had contributes to this loop. And the more loops it goes through, the stronger the paradigm, the stronger the belief. So your initial belief would be, oh, failure may be a bad thing. And then you fail, then you get shouted at by your parents. And then that feedbacks into this belief being, oh, failure means I'm getting shouted by my parents. Then you fail again. Now you get hit by your parents. And then you get feedback. Failure means I get hit by my parents. And then this gets stronger and stronger and stronger to the point where it creates a paradigm where you're built to avoid failure at all costs. So how do we create a feedback loop that overcomes this fear of failure? Well, we have to replace the belief. And look, you don't always have to believe something that is true. All you need is faith. Faith is believing in something that hasn't been proven. So, I want you to have faith and tell yourself that failure doesn't mean my parents hit me. Failure doesn't mean I'm inadequate. Failure doesn't mean I'm not worthy of love. I want you to take your specific example of how fear came to be for you and use it against itself. Believe that that's not true. You know that it's not true. Because now that I've explained it to you this way, you start to understand how it even came to be in the first place, and you know that's not you. You know that's not true. So all you have to do is just have a belief that goes against it, right? And although you don't have the feedback that's strong enough to beat the current belief, that's where we provide our own feedback to it. So, for example, say your current belief or current paradigm is my parents don't like me whenever I fail. Now that you're an adult or even a late teenager, you know that that's not true. So, the new belief, failure has no effect on my parents disliking me. And although this belief is currently stronger than this new one, our goal now is to provide evidence that this new belief is stronger than this current belief, okay? And look, before that even happens, I need you to want to change your beliefs, because if you want to stick to your current belief, then there's no point. You have to want to change to a new belief or a new paradigm, okay? That's what it takes. I mean, that's all it takes, really. It's really that simple. So, with this new belief, what action can we provide to prove that failure has nothing to do with our parents disliking us? Well, an action would be to fail. Fail and then tell your parents about it. Most likely, they're not going to dislike you for it. I want you to take action that proves this belief to be true, okay? Keep taking action that keeps proving this belief to be true. And after you've compiled enough evidence, enough feedback that this belief is true and debunks this old belief, then it creates a new paradigm. A paradigm where you can embrace failure, where you can use it to its advantage and succeed in life. Because again, to succeed, you need to fail. But if you have a fear of failure, then you're never going to take action, right? But with this new paradigm, you can take action, you can embrace failure, and you can eventually succeed. In a nutshell, we are basically simulating the experiences you went through as a child. Except instead of it breeding a fear of failure, we're breeding a paradigm that accepts failure. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you overcome the fear of failure. As always, just know that I'm rooting for you.